All right, today we're going to work on lesson 2.5. It's on equations that involve the absolute value symbol. We're going to work on how to get them prepared to solve, and then the process of solving them themselves, in which we have to write a couple of cases due to the nature of what absolute value represents. Okay, so first of all, let's review the idea of absolute value. Absolute value is defined as the distance a number is from zero, and we realize that distance is always non-negative. Okay, distance is, how far you travel, and whether you travel to the right on a number line or to the left of the number line, you still traveled a distance. So it's always non-negative. Okay, so looking at a little bit of this is, remember, this is our absolute value symbol here. So this is asking us a question. How far from zero is the number 4? Well, that's 4 units from zero. How far from zero is -3? Well, if you go from 0 to -3, you go 1, 2, 3 units. It's not negative. It's no distance here is always non-negative. Okay. How far from zero is -2.75? It's 2.75 units. How far from zero is 1 2/5? Well, it's 1 2/5 units. Kind of flipped it here. And this is saying what values of X are 2 units from zero? What could I put in here in place of X and make this true? There's actually two answers, right? 2 and -2. And this is kind of what we're looking at today right here. Okay. And then last of all, what value is -4 units from zero? Well, guys, this is there's no solution to this. There is no number I can put in here that, when I take its absolute value, is going to give me a negative answer. So the answer is empty set. There is no answer. You could write no solution as well. Okay, so that's a little review of absolute value. All right, how do we solve absolute value equations? Okay, we got a simple step process here. Okay, so first step is you have to isolate the absolute value expression itself. Okay, you have to have it on one side of the equal sign by itself in order for you to solve an absolute value equation. So you might have to add or subtract a number. You might have to divide by a number to get the absolute value itself isolated. Okay, after we isolate it, then we're going to have to write two cases for this absolute value expression. Okay, one case when we consider the value inside the absolute value expression to be positive, and the second case when the value on the inside, the value inside the absolute value expression is negative. And I'll show you what that means here with some examples. Step three, we take each of these two cases, solve them separately, and then each of those solutions is an answer to the problem. So we're actually going to, in most cases, have two answers to these absolute value equations. Okay, let's take a look. So here's my equation. The absolute value of X plus 9 has to equal 17. The directions say if there's more than one solution, separate them with commas. If there's no solution, click no solution. Okay. All right. So here's our problem. Absolute value of X plus 9 equals 17. The first thing I have to do is get this absolute value of X isolated. It's got plus 9 with it right now. I don't want that on this side. You got to eliminate it. So we're going to subtract 9 from both sides. Okay. 9 minus 9, that's a 0. So that's going to leave me with the absolute value on the left equals 17 minus 9 is 8. Okay, so my first process here is to isolate the absolute value. Now that we've done that, we're going to write two cases. One case when this expression inside this absolute value is equal to 8, and a second case when the value inside absolute value is equal to -8. Okay, so there's actually nothing to solve here because I don't have anything else besides an X in here. But just look at what happens here. If I take these answers, if I substitute this 8 in place of X, the absolute value of 8 is 8. If I put -8 in place of X, the absolute value of -8 is 8. It's 8 units from 0. So both of these two are solutions. Next example. Okay, same instructions. Different problem to begin with. The absolute value of 2x minus 1 equals 7. Okay, first step in our process, remember, was to isolate absolute value. Well, in this case, the absolute value of 2x minus 1 is on the left side of the equation by itself. I don't have to do any work here to isolate it. We're ready to go. So we're going to have two cases. One case when the expression in here, 2x minus 1, equals 7. because if I can make this equal 7, then the absolute value of 7 is 7. In a second case, when the expression in here equals -7, because the absolute value of -7 is also 7. Okay, so there's my two cases. So I solve them now. I add 1 to both sides in each of the two equations. I got 2x equals 8 on the left here, and I got 2x equals -6 on the right. Next step in solving would be to divide each side by a 2, and we get x equals 4 on the left, x equals -3, and those are my two answers. Now let's just try them out. Put -3 in here. 2 times -3 is -6. -6 minus 1 is like -6 plus -1. That's -7. And the absolute value of -7 is 7. So that works. Put the 4 in here. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 minus 1 is 7. And the absolute value of 7 is 7. So we have two different answers for this particular absolute value problem. Okay, next example. Absolute value of x plus 6 equals -5. Okay, now this is where you have to think for a second. Okay, we like to, once we learn the process, we like to just jump right in and do it. Well, first of all, we got to think, is this even possible? Is it possible for us to find a number that when I take its absolute value equals a negative number? And the answer to that is no. Remember, absolute value is the distance a number is from zero, and that always has to be positive. It cannot be set equal to a negative number. Okay? So before you jump in and go, take a look at what we're setting it equal to. Okay? Now, if this would have had other values over here that I would have had to isolate this first, then maybe that works out to become a positive in the end. But this is it right here. So we say no solution. Okay, another example. Okay, same stuff here, right? First thing I have to do is I got to isolate the absolute value. So I got the absolute value of x minus 2 plus 15 equals 34. We don't want the plus 15 over here. I want this isolated before I write anything. So subtract a 15 from both sides. And I got the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 19. We can do this problem, right? This is positive, so we can do it. We got to write two cases. One case when x minus 2 actually does equal 19. And a second case when this x minus 2 quantity equals -19, because we know the absolute value of -19 is 19. Okay, so there's my two cases. Now solve them. I'm going to add 2 to both sides, add 2 to both sides. X is 21, x is -17, and there's my two answers. Try them out. Put -17 in here. -17 minus 2 is like -17 plus -2. That's -19, and the absolute value of -19 is 19. Put 21 in here. 21 minus 2 is 19. Absolute value of 19 is 19. Okay, so two answers. Last example, probably the most complicated, or at least takes the most work to get ready to go here. I got 4 times the quantity, or times the absolute value of x minus 7 plus 11 equals 63. Okay, remember the first thing we have to do is we're going to isolate this absolute value of x minus 7. We got to get this on the left side by itself. So the first thing we're going to do is subtract 11 from both sides. Right? 11 minus 11 is 0. That gets rid of that plus 11 on the left side. And then 63 minus 11, well, that's 52. Okay, now I have 4 times the absolute value of x minus 7 equals 52. Now I want to get this absolute value of x minus 7 by itself. So how do we undo multiplying by 4? Well, the inverse of multiplying by 4 would be to divide both sides by 4. Okay, that 4 and that 4 will cancel. So I'll have the absolute value of x minus 7 on the left by itself equals 13. Okay, so we did all of this work to isolate absolute value. Now that it's isolated, now we just set up our two cases, right? Case 1, case 2. Case 1, when x minus 7 equals 13. And case 2, when x minus 7 equals -13. Because when x minus 7 equals -13, you take the absolute value of it and you get 13. So solve each of these. We add 7 to both sides. X is 20, x is -6. There's my two answers. Try them out. Put -6 in here. -6 minus 7 is -6 plus -7. That's -13. Absolute value of -13 is 13. Okay, put 20 in here. 20 minus 7 is 13. Absolute value of 13 is 13. So you can check them real quick. Okay, so those are the kinds of problems we're going to work on tonight. All right. Make sure you write out your equations, show how you're isolating absolute value, show your two cases, right? Show your solutions. This all has to be written out, guys. Okay, follow the problems on Alex, but you still have to write them out and solve them. All right, I'll let you get at it.